What if I told you the answer to one of the biggest puzzles in modern cosmology wasn't hiding in some giant particle accelerator, but maybe in the verses of an ancient text? Today we're diving into a really unique model, one derived from the Qur'an, that tries to do just that, connect scripture with some of science's most baffling paradoxes.
So, it all kicks off with a genuine cosmic mystery that has physicists totally stumped. It's called the Hubble Tension. And here's the deal in a nutshell. When we look way, way back and measure the expansion of the early universe, we get one speed. But when we measure it closer to us in our own cosmic neighborhood, we get a totally different and faster speed. How is that even possible?
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. The source material we're digging into today puts forward a pretty radical idea. It says the answer isn't some new particle we haven't found yet. Instead, it's a kind of symbolic code embedded right there in the Qur'an, laying out a framework for reality that's just been waiting for us to connect the dots.
Okay, so before we jump into all the symbolic interpretation, let's just make sure we're on the same page about the science here. Just how different are these two speeds we're talking about? Yeah, just take a look at the numbers. When we look at the early universe, we get an expansion rate of about 67 kilometers per second per megaparsec, and a megaparsec is just a ridiculously huge cosmic distance. But when we look at the universe nearby, that number shoots up to around 74. Now, this is not a small mistake or a rounding error. This is a massive, fundamental disagreement that physicists just can't explain.
So, how in the world does this framework propose to solve a puzzle like two different speeds? Well, it starts with a foundational concept. What if reality itself isn't just one single thing, but is actually split into two distinct parallel realms? According to this interpretation, everything, and I mean everything, comes from a single, unified divine command, be. The idea is that this one creative spark doesn't just make one reality, it actually unfolds into two different but totally connected realms of existence. And this is how that duality breaks down. On one side, you've got what the source calls the word field. This is the wave realm, the unseen world of pure potential, light, and signals. On the other side, you have the book field, the particle realm. That's the physical world we can see and touch, matter, actions, consequences. Two very different realms, but both coming from that same single source. Right, but this two-part reality isn't just sitting there doing nothing. No, it's driven by a dynamic, symbolic tension. So the crucial point here is that this isn't your typical good versus evil story. It's really about two different ways of responding to knowledge. On one side, you have Iblis, symbolizing pride in what you know, that logic of I am better, which is represented by fire. And on the other side, you have Ibrahim, who represents humble submission because of what he knows, and that's symbolized by light.
This whole duality then gets mapped onto two of the divine attributes in Islam. You have Al-Rahman, the most merciful, who's associated with that wave field. You can think of it as this vast, dispersed energy of potential life. And then there's Al-Rahim, the bestower of mercy, who governs the particle field, the one who takes that wave of potential and collapses it into a solid, witnessed reality that we can actually experience.
And the framework goes even deeper. It suggests that the stories of the prophets, they aren't just historical tales. They're actually archetypal cycles that show us the fundamental laws of this dual-field cosmology in action.
It's all presented through this universal cycle of existence that we all know: life, death, and resurrection. The source says this cycle just repeats over and over in both realms. So, for instance, in the physical book field, the prophet Yahya's story symbolizes life, Suleiman's story represents death, the collapse of physical form, and Musa's story embodies resurrection and renewal.
So you can actually trace this whole thing like a single unfolding story of mercy. It's a progression that kicks off with Ibrahim's trial by fire and then culminates with a final prophet who completes what's called the light cycle, basically unifying all these cosmic principles.
Okay, so that's the grand cosmic structure. But you're probably asking, what does any of this have to do with us, with me? Well, this is where it gets really personal.
The source uses this really specific term for the human soul, a quantum bispinner. Now, don't get hung up on the physics jargon. Just think of it like a coin spinning in the air. It's constantly flickering between two potential states, right? For the soul, one of those states is alignment with light and truth. The other state is alignment with fire, which represents falsehood and ego.
And this whole idea of a soul with this built-in dual potential is grounded right in the Qur'anic text itself. It talks about the soul being inspired with the knowledge of both its capacity for wrongdoing and its capacity for doing right. So in the end, your choices determine which way you align. Okay, let's bring all these threads together now. The two realms, the cosmic cycles, the quantum soul, and circle all the way back to where we started and see if this framework can actually solve those scientific puzzles.
What's really striking is that cosmic expansion isn't presented as some newfangled scientific discovery here. This interpretation points straight to verses that frame it as a deliberate, ongoing act of creation.
And here it is, the grand convergence. That Hubble tension we started with, explained by two realms with two different expansion rates. The famous wave-particle duality from quantum physics, well, that's mirrored in the duality between unseen potential, the wave, and observed reality, the particle. This framework even finds parallels for time dilation in verses that describe a divine day lasting for thousands of human years. It's like a single, cohesive map for a whole bunch of scientific mysteries.
So in the end, everything resolves, everything folds back in on itself. The book field of matter is described as being rolled up like scrolls. The word field returns to pure light. And both of these apparently separate realms just return to their single origin, that one divine command.
Which leaves us with one last, really provocative thought to chew on. If the entire universe, with its two fields of matter and light, is structured like a kind of divine text, then what does that make our consciousness? Are we just characters in the story? Or are we actually the readers whose job it is to understand it?